Meet Professor Jack. A day in the life. His life is a whirlwind of equations, lectures, and family chaos. He wouldn't have it any other way. Jack thrives on student energy, discovery, and family love. A man of science and a family man. His children are his pride and joy, balancing research, teaching, and family. This is his life, his purpose, his passion. Jack's office at home was his sanctuary, a space filled with books, papers, and the comforting glow of his computer screen. It was here that he felt most alive, most in his element. But lately, the line between work and home had become increasingly blurred. His research followed him into the living room, the dinner table, even into his dreams. The demands of academia were relentless, a constant race against the clock. But Jack was determined to be present for his family, to be the husband and father they deserved. It was a constant juggling act, a delicate balancing act that required all his focus and energy. But Jack wouldn't have it any other way. Family was his priority, his reason for being. This particular research paper, however, carried more weight than usual. It was the culmination of months of work, a groundbreaking study that had the potential to reshape his field. The pressure was on, and Jack felt the weight of expectation on his shoulders. He knew that his colleagues were watching, waiting to see if he could deliver. But more than that, he wanted to make his family proud. He wanted to show his children that anything was possible with hard work and determination. Little did he know, the coming days would test his resolve, pushing him to his limits and forcing him to confront the true meaning of balance in his life. The research race was on, and Jack was determined to win, both in the lab and at home. The insistent chirping of the alarm clock pierced through Jack's dreams. He reached over and silenced the device, a groan escaping his lips. Sleep was a luxury he could ill afford these days. 5 a.m. The house was still shrouded in pre-dawn darkness. The only sound was the soft breathing of his wife, Rachel. Rachel, S1. Jack, you should get some more rest. For a moment, he allowed himself to be lulled back into sleep. But the weight of the day pulled him back to the surface. He slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Rachel. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, a comforting scent that always helped clear the early morning fog in his head. Jack took a long sip, savoring the warmth spreading through him. He loved these quiet mornings, the stillness before the storm of the day, a time for reflection, for gathering his thoughts, for steeling himself for the challenges that lay ahead. Today, however, a familiar anxiety gnawed at the edges of his calm. The research paper, the science fair, the constant struggle to find a balance between his work and his family. It was a lot for anyone to handle. But Jack was not one to back down from a challenge. He thrived on pressure, on pushing himself to his limits. It was in these moments of intense focus that he felt most alive, most connected to the mysteries of the universe he sought to unravel. The sound of tiny footsteps padding down the hallway shattered the illusion of tranquility. A moment later, his two children, 7-year-old Emily and 9-year-old Ethan, came bounding into the kitchen, their faces a mixture of sleepiness and excitement.
Daddy, did you remember about the science fair? We need to finish our projects.
Ethan, ever the pragmatist, chimed in, his brow furrowed in concentration as he adjusted a miniature planet on his model of the solar system.
Yeah, Dad. We're presenting tomorrow, remember? You promised you'd help us.
Jack's heart sank. The science fair. How could he have forgotten? It was just one more thing vying for his attention. One more demand on his already overloaded schedule. He had completely forgotten to factor it in. Of course I remember, Jack said, forcing a smile he didn't quite feel. He ruffled Ethan's hair and gave Emily a reassuring hug. I wouldn't miss it for the world. We'll work on your projects tonight, I promise. He could see the relief in their eyes, the unquestioning trust that he, their father, would always be there for them. It was a trust he cherished, a responsibility he took seriously, even when it felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Now he said, ushering them towards the breakfast table, "How about some pancakes? We've got a big day ahead of us." As he watched them eat, their chatter filling the kitchen with the sounds of childhood, Jack made a silent vow to himself. He would find a way to balance it all, to excel in his career without sacrificing his family. He had to. There was simply no other option. Section 5. The Weight of Expectations. After a hurried breakfast and a flurry of goodbyes, Jack retreated to his home office, the children's excited chatter still ringing in his ears. The weight of his responsibilities pressed down on him. He had promised his children his time, but he also had a research paper due. The stakes were high, the pressure immense. He glanced at the clock. 8 a.m. His first online class of the day would begin soon. He had students depending on him, young minds eager to learn, to be inspired. He couldn't let them down, but the image of his children's faces, their excitement over the science fair, their unwavering trust in him, lingered in his mind. He had a lot to juggle, a lot to prove. The question was, could he find a way to do it all without dropping the ball? Section 1. The Virtual Classroom, a distraction-filled lecture. Jack adjusted his headset, the familiar weight of it a reminder of the virtual world he now inhabited for a good portion of his day. His home office, once a sanctuary of quiet contemplation, had transformed into a makeshift broadcasting studio. On his computer screen, the faces of his students stared back at him, a grid of expectant eyes from bedrooms and dorm rooms scattered across the city. This was the new normal, the world of online learning, a world he had slowly adapted to, though not without its challenges. He launched into his lecture, his voice taking on the familiar cadence of a seasoned professor, explaining complex equations and theories with an ease that belied the turmoil in his mind. But the science fair, his promise to his children, kept intruding on his thoughts, like a stray comet disrupting the orderly orbits of his carefully constructed lecture notes. Rachel's reality check, a high-stakes project. Rachel faced her own set of professional challenges. The phone call from her boss had come just as she was leaving for work. A major client needed a new marketing campaign, and they needed it yesterday. The deadline was tight, the pressure immense, but Rachel was ready. She gathered her team, their faces reflecting excitement and apprehension. This was their moment to prove their worth. The familiar chaos of the after-school rush hit Jack like a tidal wave. Emily and Ethan burst through the front door, their backpacks spilling onto the floor, their voices a torrent of excited chatter about their day.
Dad, we need baking soda. And vinegar, and red food coloring. It's for our volcano.
Emily shouted, waving a crumpled piece of paper in his face. Ethan, ever the meticulous planner, consulted a list on his phone.
We also need poster board markers and glitter. Lots and lots of glitter.
Jack's head swam. The research paper, his looming presentation, the sheer volume of work that still lay ahead of him. It all felt overwhelming. He had promised himself he would be present, that he would be there for his kids. But right now, all he felt was a growing sense of panic. Jack retreated to his home office, the sounds of his children's enthusiastic preparations echoing distantly. He tried to focus on his work, but the words swam before his eyes. 7 p.m. The deadline was fast approaching, and he was nowhere near finished. A wave of panic washed over him. This paper was too important. His career depended on it. He had to make a choice. His research, his career, or his family. And yet, here he was. Just as the walls of his office seemed to be closing in, a gentle knock on the door pulled Jack back from the brink. He looked up to see Rachel standing in the doorway, her face a mixture of concern and understanding.
You okay in here, honey? You seem a million miles away.
Jack hesitated, unsure how to articulate the storm of anxiety brewing inside him. How could he explain the pressure he was under? the fear of letting everyone down without burdening her with his worries. But Rachel, as she always did, seemed to read his mind. She crossed the room and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him, reminding him of the world beyond his research, beyond the looming deadlines.
How about I take over the science fair tonight? You focus on your paper, get that off your plate. The kids and I can handle the volcano and the solar system.
Jack looked up at her, his heart filled with gratitude. He knew she had her own deadlines, her own pressures to deal with. Yet here she was, offering to take on more, to ease his burden.
Go, we've got this.
And so, with a mixture of relief and guilt, Jack retreated to his office, leaving Rachel to navigate the chaos of the science fair preparations. He could hear their laughter, their excited chatter, and for a moment, he allowed himself to relax, to trust that they would be okay. Downstairs, the kitchen had transformed into a scene of delightful chaos. Emily and Ethan, clad in old t-shirts that served as makeshift lab coats, were surrounded by a mountain of supplies. Baking soda volcanoes threatened to erupt across the countertop. Vinegar fumes mingled with the scent of melting chocolate, apparently an essential ingredient for a model of the solar system, according to Emily. And glitter, that ubiquitous symbol of childhood creativity, seemed to coat every surface. Just as Rachel began to feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of creative energy unleashed in her kitchen, the doorbell rang. It was Jack's mother, Grandma Rose, arriving just in time for her weekly dose of chaos.
My goodness, what have we got here? A science fair explosion? Don't worry, kids. Grandma's here to help.
Back in his office, Jack tried to focus on his research, to block out the sounds of laughter and occasional shrieks of excitement emanating from downstairs. He worked tirelessly, his fingers flying across the keyboard, the minutes turning into hours. But still, he pushed himself, fueled by coffee. This research paper was too important. As the first rays of dawn peeked through the blinds, Jack finally typed the last sentence of his paper. He had done it. The calm before the storm, a fleeting moment of peace. Downstairs, the house was quiet. The remnants of the previous night's science fair frenzy cleared away. Rachel, her hair escaping from its ponytail, slept soundly on the couch, a half-eaten cookie resting on her chest. The morning of the science fair dawned bright and sunny, a stark contrast to the sleep-deprived faces of both Jack and Rachel. The house buzzed with a nervous energy as they scrambled to get themselves and the children ready.
Excitedly. Look, Mom, I'm a princess scientist. Ethan, ever the pragmatist, carefully inspected his model of the solar system, making last-minute adjustments.
On the phone. Rachel, I need those reports by noon today. No excuses. Jack, despite his overwhelming fatigue, found himself caught up in the excitement.
The school gymnasium, usually a hive of athletic activity, had been transformed into a vibrant celebration of science. Colorful displays lined the walls, showcasing a dizzying array of projects, from potato batteries to homemade slime.
Dad, look at that volcano, it's amazing! Jack surveyed the scene, a sense of nostalgia washing over him. Ethan, come check this out! Emily and Ethan, their initial nervousness giving way to excitement, eagerly pointed out their favorite projects. Jack and Rachel exchanged a tired but proud smile.
Pride and recognition. Emily and Ethan's moment to shine. The moment of truth arrived.
With a confidence that surprised even her parents, she launched into her presentation, explaining the science behind volcanic eruptions. Ethan, ever the meticulous researcher, presented his model of the solar system, rattling off planetary facts and figures. Jack and Rachel watched their children, their hearts swelling with pride.
Academic accolades, Jack's presentation. Later that afternoon, Jack found himself standing at the podium in a university lecture hall, a familiar sense of anticipation settling over him.
He had poured his heart and soul into his research, and now it was time to share his findings with the world. He glanced out at the audience, a sea of expectant faces.
But then he saw them, seated in the back row, their faces beaming with pride, Rachel, Emily, and Ethan. And just like that, the pressure lifted.
The presentation nerves and triumph. Jack took a deep breath and began his presentation. He spoke with passion and conviction, his voice resonating with the audience as he guided them through his research. He fielded questions with confidence and grace, his responses a blend of scientific rigor and genuine enthusiasm. By the time he finished his presentation, the lecture hall erupted in applause. He had done it. He had not only proven his point, but had also pushed the boundaries of his field. A familiar space, returning to academia. The bustling university campus stood in stark contrast to the exuberant chaos of the elementary school science fair. He inhaled deeply, the scent of old books and freshly mowed grass, a familiar and comforting blend. But today, as he made his way towards the lecture hall, a new awareness accompanied him. It was the echo of Emily's excited chatter about volcanic eruptions, the memory of Ethan's meticulous labeling of planetary orbits. He was no longer just a scientist, but a father, a role model, a guide for his children. Pre-presentation jitters, the calm before the storm. The lecture hall buzzed with anticipation. Professors and students alike, their faces a mixture of curiosity and professional skepticism, filled the rows of seats. Backstage, Jack adjusted his tie, his reflection in the dusty mirror a stark contrast to the image of himself surrounded by glitter and glue just a few hours earlier. He had poured months of his life, countless sleepless nights into this research. And now, the moment of truth had arrived. He took a deep breath, willing his racing heart to slow. This time, he carried the hopes and expectations of more than just his academic peers. A family in the wings, silent support. A gentle knock on the door startled Jack from his pre-presentation reverie. He turned to see Rachel standing in the doorway, her face a beacon of calm in the storm of his nerves.
Just wanted to wish you luck. Don't worry about us. We're fine. Just focus on your presentation. And then, as if on cue, Emily and Ethan appeared beside her, their faces a mixture of awe and excitement. In that instant, the weight of the presentation seemed to lift.
Section 4. A moment of doubt. Facing the critics. The presentation began smoothly enough. Jack, his initial nervousness replaced by a familiar exhilaration, guided his audience through his research. But as he delved deeper into his findings, he could sense a shift in the room. The initial curiosity gave way to skepticism, the polite nods replaced by furrowed brows and pursed lips. He pressed on, his voice unwavering, his conviction fueled by the knowledge that he had meticulously followed the scientific method. But doubt, like a persistent weed, began to take root in the fertile soil of his mind. Section 5. Triumph and Relief. The weight lifts. The Q&A session was a whirlwind of challenging questions, some bordering on hostile. Jack, his mind racing, parried each one with thoughtful responses. And then, just as he felt his energy waning, a hand shot up from the back of the lecture hall. It was Professor Davis, a renowned physicist known for his rigorous intellect and his unwavering support of groundbreaking research. Professor Davis's words, spoken with the weight of his reputation, shifted the energy in the room. And as the applause washed over him, Jack realized that he had achieved something far more significant than simply proving his point. " ' The warm glow of the setting sun painted the dining room in hues of orange and gold, casting long shadows as the Miller family gathered around the table. The aroma of Rachel's famous lasagna filled the air, a comforting scent that spoke of home, family, and celebration. Jack as narrator. "A toast," Jack announced, raising his glass of sparkling grape juice at Emily's insistence. "To Emily and Ethan, for conquering the science fair with their incredible projects." Emily, her cheeks flushed with excitement and a smudge of chocolate frosting on her chin, held up her blue ribbon as if it were an Olympic medal. Rachel, as S1. "And to you, Jack," Rachel added, her eyes sparkling with love and admiration. As the laughter subsided, a comfortable silence settled over the table. Jack leaned back in his chair, a wave of contentment washing over him. He had achieved a significant milestone in his career today. His presentation met with both skepticism and grudging respect. But as he looked around the table at the faces of his family, he realized that his greatest accomplishment wasn't something that could be measured in academic accolades. It was the love that bound them together, the laughter they shared, the unwavering support they offered one another. He had spent years chasing after knowledge, but it was here, in the warmth of his home, that he found the most profound answer of all. The past few days had been a whirlwind of deadlines, presentations, and science fair chaos. But through it all, Jack had learned a valuable lesson about the importance of balance. He had pushed himself to his limits, both professionally and personally, and had emerged from the experience with a renewed appreciation for the delicate dance of life. He realized now that true fulfillment came not from compartmentalizing his life, but from finding a way to integrate his various roles, scientist, husband, father, into a harmonious whole. The demands of his career would always be there, the allure of the unknown beckoning him to push further. But he was determined to find a way to make it work, to be present for his family, to nurture their dreams as they nurtured his. As the last rays of sunlight faded, casting long shadows across the dining room, Jack rose and began clearing the table, a sense of quiet contentment settling over him. The house was filled with Emily's giggles and Ethan's thoughtful questions. Rachel hummed as she washed dishes. Jack paused, heart overflowing with gratitude. This was his life, his love, his legacy. Together, they would face the unknown, hand in hand, hearts filled with love and adventure.